Let me ask you something. Imagine you walk into a room full of the smartest investors in the world. Billionaires, Wall Street veterans, Silicon Valley legends, people who have made and lost fortunes, people who understand business, risk, and money better than almost anyone alive. And you tell them your plan. You're going to build a car company from scratch in America, where the last successful American car startup was founded in 1925, where giants like General Motors and Ford have hundreds of thousands of employees, billion-dollar factories, and a century of experience. And not just any car, an electric car, at a time when the word electric car made people think of slow, ugly golf carts that could barely make it to the grocery store and back. You know what every single one of those smart, experienced investors would tell you? No, absolutely not. This is the worst idea we've ever heard. And they did. They said exactly that. But here's the thing that makes this story so fascinating, so genuinely mind-bending when you really sit down and think about it. Elon Musk didn't just ignore them. He didn't just prove them wrong. He did something that almost no one in business history has ever done. He broke every single rule about how companies are supposed to be built. He spent money in ways that made accountants lose sleep. He made bets that seemed completely irrational. He went to the edge of bankruptcy, not once, not twice, but multiple times. And somehow, every single time, something happened that pulled him back. And today, Tesla is worth more than Toyota, Volkswagen, Ford, and General Motors combined. So the real question isn't whether Elon Musk got lucky. The real question is, what did he understand about money, risk, and building something that almost everyone else got completely wrong? Because here's the thing. This isn't just a story about cars or technology. This is a story about the psychology of wealth creation, about how the biggest fortunes in history are almost never built the way you think they are, about the difference between how ordinary people think about money and how people who build extraordinary things think about money. And by the end of this video, I promise you, the way you think about risk, about investing, about building anything valuable in your life, it's going to be fundamentally different. So let's start at the very beginning. Here's what most people believe about building wealth. They believe you need to be careful, smart, conservative. You save money, you avoid risk, you build slowly and steadily, and over time you accumulate enough to feel secure. You don't bet everything on one thing. You diversify, you protect what you have. And honestly, for most things in life, that's reasonable advice. But here's the psychological trap hidden inside that thinking. When we talk about risk, our brains don't actually process it the way a calculator would. There's a famous psychological concept called loss aversion, discovered by two researchers named Daniel Kahneman and Amos Tversky. And what they found is genuinely shocking. The pain of losing $100 is psychologically about twice as powerful as the pleasure of gaining $100. Think about that for a second. If I gave you a coin flip where heads means you win $200 and tails means you lose $100, that's a mathematically great bet. On average, you come out ahead. But most people, when you actually put them in that situation, feel deeply uncomfortable taking it because the fear of losing $100 is stronger than the excitement of winning $200. This is called loss aversion, and it is the single most powerful force that keeps ordinary people from building extraordinary wealth. Because building something genuinely great, something that changes industries, that creates real lasting value, almost always requires taking risks that feel, in the moment, absolutely terrifying. And nobody in the history of modern business has demonstrated this more dramatically than what happened between 2003 and 2010 with Tesla Motors. Let me take you back to where this story actually begins. It's the early 2000s. Elon Musk has just sold a company called PayPal to eBay for $1.5 billion. His share of that? About $180 million. Now, if you're a normal human being with $180 million, what do? You buy a house, several houses, maybe a yacht. You invest conservatively. You make sure you and your family are set for life and never have to worry about money again. But Elon Musk did something that, honestly, I still find hard to fully comprehend even knowing how the story ends. He took essentially all of it, every dollar, and split it between two companies. One of them was SpaceX, a rocket company that he wanted to use to eventually colonize Mars, which, by the way, is not something that sounds like a normal, sensible business plan. The other was Tesla. But here's a detail that most people don't know about Tesla. Elon Musk didn't actually found Tesla. The company was started in 2003 by two engineers, Martin Eberhard and Mark Tarpenning. They were the ones who had the original idea for a high-performance electric car. They had done the early technical work. They had created the company. Elon Musk came in as an investor in 2004. He led the very first funding round, investing $6.5 million of his own money, and he took the role of chairman of the board. Now, why does this matter? Because it tells you something important about how Musk thinks about money and opportunity. He didn't need to be the founder. He didn't need to be the one who came up with the idea. What he recognized was a genuine opportunity, a technology that he believed could change the world, and he moved quickly and decisively to put himself in the center of it. This is actually one of the most underrated wealth-building instincts that almost nobody talks about. Most people wait for the perfect idea that's entirely their own. Musk was willing to put serious money into someone else's vision because he recognized the potential, not because he needed the credit. But the story of how Tesla almost died before it ever really lived, that's where the real psychology lesson begins. The original plan for Tesla was in theory straightforward. Build a sports car, an electric sports car, that would be fast, beautiful, and cool, not a boring eco-no-box that said, I care about the environment but not about fun. Something that would make people say, wait, electric cars can do that? The car was called the Roadster, and it was based on a chassis borrowed from a British sports car company called Lotus. The idea was to take Lotus's existing lightweight frame, put Tesla's electric drivetrain inside it, and create something spectacular for around $100,000. The budget for developing the Roadster was originally estimated at $25 million. Want to know what the final cost actually was? $140 million. The project went almost 6 times over budget, and nothing, absolutely nothing went according to plan. The borrowed Lotus chassis? It turned out that almost every single part of it had to be redesigned from scratch because of how the electric components fit together. The transmission, which should have been one of the simpler parts of the car, went through 3 completely different designs and still almost didn't work. The battery system kept presenting new engineering challenges that nobody had anticipated. And while all of this was happening, the money was running out. Here's where the psychology gets really interesting. Most people, when a project goes 6 times over budget, when every milestone gets missed, when the problems keep multiplying, have a very natural and understandable response. They call it a sunk cost fallacy when it goes wrong, but in the moment, it feels like wisdom. You've spent this much. Maybe it's time to stop throwing good money after bad. Cut your losses, move on. Every rational financial advisor in the world would have told Musk to walk away. But Musk had a different mental model for what he was building, and understanding that mental model is actually the key to understanding everything about how Tesla succeeded. He wasn't thinking quarter by quarter. He wasn't thinking about whether the Roadster would be profitable. He was thinking about what proving that a great electric car was possible would do for the entire industry. He was thinking 10 steps ahead. He called it a strategy of planned loss-making. The Roadster wasn't supposed to make money. It was supposed to prove something. It was supposed to shift the entire psychological conversation about electric vehicles. Before the Roadster, when people heard electric car, they thought slow, ugly, limited range, no fun. After the Roadster, that story changed forever. 0 to 60 in under 4 seconds, a top speed of 125 miles per hour, and it was beautiful. The Roadster was not a product. It was an advertisement, the most expensive, most important advertisement in the history of the automobile industry. And it worked. It worked completely. But the crisis was just beginning. Here's something that will make your brain hurt a little bit. At the same time that Tesla was burning through cash developing the Roadster, at the same time that the budget was exploding and the engineering challenges were multiplying, Tesla started developing the Model S. The Model S was going to be a completely different kind of car. Not a sports car, a premium sedan, a family car, something that a successful professional might actually drive every day. And unlike the Roadster, which borrowed its basic structure from Lotus, the Model S was going to be built entirely from the ground up, an original Tesla design, original chassis, original manufacturing process, original everything. This meant Tesla needed a factory. In 2010, Tesla bought a former joint venture factory in Fremont, California that had been owned by Toyota and General Motors. The price was $42 million, which sounds like a lot until you realize that the factory had originally cost over $1 billion to build, and GM had walked away from it because the economics just didn't make sense to them during the financial crisis. Tesla got a $1 billion factory for $42 million. This is one of the most underappreciated moments in the entire Tesla story, and it illustrates a principle about wealth and opportunity that I want you to really think about. There's a concept in investing called counter-cyclical thinking. It basically means when everyone else is running away from something, scared and panicking, sometimes the smartest thing you can do is walk towards it, carefully and thoughtfully. The 2008 and 2009 financial crisis destroyed enormous amounts of wealth. Companies failed, jobs were lost, fear was everywhere. And in that environment of fear, assets got dramatically underpriced because nobody wanted to take any risk at all. Tesla walked into that environment with clear eyes and bought infrastructure that would have been completely out of reach in any other moment. That factory became the foundation on which everything that came after was built. But, and this is the part that most people forget, all of this was happening while Tesla itself was on the absolute edge of collapse. I want to tell you about one specific day, Christmas Eve 2008. Tesla is running out of money, not just a little short, the kind of out of money where the company might not exist in January. Elon Musk has already put his personal money into Tesla multiple times. He has put money into SpaceX. The financial crisis has made everything worse. Investors are terrified. Nobody wants to put money into a risky electric car startup when banks are failing and the entire economy looks like it might be coming apart. Musk is on record saying that he was so stressed during this period that he couldn't sleep. He was having physical symptoms from the anxiety. His personal finances were also stretched to the point where he was borrowing money from friends just to cover his own expenses. And on Christmas Eve 2008, Musk made a decision. He took his last personal reserves, money that he had set aside, money that was quite literally his last financial safety net, and he put it into Tesla to keep the company alive through the end of the year. I want you to really sit with that for a moment. This is not a story about someone who had infinite resources and could afford to take big risks. By the end of 2008, Musk had genuinely risked everything, not as a figure of speech, everything. His homes, his financial security, his ability to pay his own bills, everything was on the line. And the reason this matters psychologically, the reason this is so important to understand, is that most people, when they talk about taking risks to build wealth, are talking about risking money they can technically afford to lose, a percentage of their savings, an amount that if it went to zero would hurt but not destroy them. What Musk was doing was something categorically different. He was risking his entire financial existence because he genuinely believed that what he was building was important enough to justify that risk. Is that crazy? Maybe. Probably, by most reasonable definitions. But here's what I want you to think about. The people who build the most extraordinary things, the people who create the companies that change industries and generate the most dramatic wealth, they almost always have this quality: a willingness to go all in on something they believe in at a level that seems unreasonable to everyone watching from the outside. Warren Buffett calls it having a high pain threshold. Steve Jobs had it, Jeff Bezos had it, and Elon Musk has it in a way that is almost unprecedented. But the Christmas Eve moment wasn't the end of the crisis. It was actually just the beginning of a turnaround. In 2010, something happened that changed everything for Tesla. The U.S. Department of Energy, as part of a program to support clean energy technology, approved a loan to Tesla for $465 million. Now, here's something interesting about how people remember this story. Some people use this fact to argue that Tesla was built on government money, and there are others who use it as proof that public investment in emerging technology can pay off. Both of those conversations are fine, but what I want to focus on is what Tesla did with that money, because the how is the thing that actually matters. Musk and his team used that capital, combined with money from a public offering that Tesla did in June 2010, which was the first American automaker IPO since Ford went public in 1956, to fund the development and launch of the Model S. The Model S launched in 2012, and it changed everything. Here's a way to think about what the Model S did for Tesla. Imagine you've been trying to convince people that a new kind of restaurant is possible. People are skeptical. They don't believe it can be done. And then one day you open the restaurant and the food is so unbelievably good that every food critic in the world gives it 5 stars simultaneously. And suddenly everyone who is skeptical has to completely reconsider everything they thought they knew. That's what the Model S did. Motor Trend gave it Car of the Year. Consumer Reports gave it a rating of 99 out of 100, the highest score any car had ever received in their testing. The New York Times, the Wall Street Journal, every automotive publication, the reviews were extraordinary. The Model S wasn't just a good electric car. It was, by any objective measure, one of the best cars ever made. Period. Full stop. And that changed the financial story of Tesla completely. Before the Model S, Tesla was a startup that might or might not survive. After the Model S, Tesla was a company that had proven it could do something nobody thought was possible. And that proof, that demonstrated capability, unlocked a completely different relationship with investors, with customers, and with the financial markets. In May 2013, Tesla repaid its entire government loan, 9 years ahead of schedule, with interest. The company that everyone said couldn't survive had not just survived, it had delivered on its promise. Now I want to step back and talk about the deeper lesson here, because there are things going on in this story that go way beyond just the facts of what happened. There's a whole psychology operating here that explains not just Tesla, but really how any extraordinary wealth creation actually works. The first insight is something I'd call the story before the numbers principle. In normal business thinking, companies are valued based on their current financial performance. Revenue, profit margins, growth rate. These are the numbers that determine what something is worth. And for most businesses, that's completely correct. But Tesla was almost never valued that way. Even in its early years, when it was losing money hand over fist, investors were assigning it enormous value. Why? Because Tesla had successfully created a story about the future that people believed in, a story about a world where all transportation runs on clean energy, a story about a company that was going to be at the center of that transformation. And here's the psychological insight. Human beings don't just invest in current reality, they invest in their vision of the future. And when a company successfully makes you believe that their vision of the future is the correct one, you will assign enormous value to it long before the numbers justify it. This is not irrational, by the way. Some of the greatest investments in history have been made by people who were willing to fund a compelling vision before the financial proof existed. Amazon lost money for years. Netflix seemed crazy. Apple almost went bankrupt before it created the iPod and then the iPhone. The ability to create and sustain belief in a future vision is one of the most powerful and underappreciated skills in business, and Musk has it to a degree that is almost unprecedented. But the Christmas Eve moment wasn't the end of the crisis. It was actually just the beginning of a turnaround. In 2010, something happened that changed everything for Tesla. The U.S. Department of Energy, as part of a program to support clean energy technology, approved a loan to Tesla for $465 million. Now here's something interesting about how people remember this story. Some people use this fact to argue that Tesla was built on government money, and there are others who use it as proof that public investment in emerging technology can pay off. Both of those conversations are fine, but what I want to focus on is what Tesla did with that money, because the how is the thing that actually matters. Musk and his team used that capital, combined with money from a public offering that Tesla did in June 2010, which was the first American automaker IPO since Ford went public in 1956, to fund the development and launch of the Model S. The Model S launched in 2012, and it changed everything. Here's a way to think about what the Model S did for Tesla. Imagine you've been trying to convince people that a new kind of restaurant is possible. People are skeptical. They don't believe it can be done. And then one day you open the restaurant and the food is so unbelievably good that every food critic in the world gives it 5 stars simultaneously. And suddenly everyone who is skeptical has to completely reconsider everything they thought they knew. That's what the Model S did. Motor Trend gave it Car of the Year. Consumer Reports gave it a rating of 99 out of 100, the highest score any car had ever received in their testing. The New York Times, the Wall Street Journal, every automotive publication, the reviews were extraordinary. The Model S wasn't just a good electric car. It was, by any objective measure, one of the best cars ever made. Period. Full stop. And that changed the financial story of Tesla completely. Before the Model S, Tesla was a startup that might or might not survive. After the Model S, Tesla was a company that had proven it could do something nobody thought was possible. And that proof, that demonstrated capability, unlocked a completely different relationship with investors, with customers, and with the financial markets. In May 2013, Tesla repaid its entire government loan, 9 years ahead of schedule, with interest.
The company that everyone said couldn't survive had not just survived, it had delivered on its promise. Now, I want to step back and talk about the deeper lesson here, because there are things going on in this story that go way beyond just the facts of what happened. There's a whole psychology operating here that explains not just Tesla, but really how any extraordinary wealth creation actually works. The first insight is something I'd call the story before the numbers principle. In normal business thinking, companies are valued based on their current financial performance. Revenue, profit margins, growth rate, these are the numbers that determine what something is worth. And for most businesses, that's completely correct. But Tesla was almost never valued that way. Even in its early years, when it was losing money hand over fist, investors were assigning it enormous value. Why? Because Tesla had successfully created a story about the future that people believed in. A story about a world where all transportation runs on clean energy. A story about a company that was going to be at the center of that transformation. And here's the psychological insight. Human beings don't just invest in current reality, they invest in their vision of the future. And when a company successfully makes you believe that their vision of the future is the correct one, you will assign enormous value to it long before the numbers justify it. This is not irrational, by the way. Some of the greatest investments in history have been made by people who were willing to fund a compelling vision before the financial proof existed. Amazon lost money for years. Netflix seemed crazy. Apple almost went bankrupt before it created the iPod and then the iPhone. The ability to create and sustain belief in a future vision is one of the most powerful and underappreciated skills in business, and Musk has it to a degree that is almost supernatural. The second insight is what I'd call the master plan approach to building value. In 2006, Musk published something called Tesla's Secret Master Plan. It was a blog post, and in it, he laid out exactly what Tesla was going to do step by step. Step 1, build an expensive sports car for early adopters who could afford to pay a premium. Use the revenue and learnings from that to fund Step 2. Step 2, build a more affordable luxury car, the Model S. Use that to fund Step 3. Step 3, build an even more affordable mass market car, the Model 3. Step 4, use the profits from all of that to provide clean energy generation and storage. Here's why this was psychologically brilliant. Most companies keep their strategy secret. They're afraid that competitors will copy them. They treat their plans as proprietary information. Musk published it. He told everyone exactly what he was going to do. And by doing that, he did something incredibly clever. He turned his business strategy into a public commitment. He created accountability. He made it much harder to abandon the plan because the plan was now public, and abandoning it would be very visible. And there's another psychological effect that's even more powerful. By publishing the plan, he invited customers, employees, and investors into the story. He said, "Here's where we're going. Do you want to be part of it?" People don't just want to buy products. They want to be part of something. They want to believe that their choices have meaning beyond just the transaction. Tesla created a community of believers, people who weren't just buying cars, but who felt like they were participating in something important. That community became one of Tesla's most valuable assets. Tesla owners became the most passionate brand advocates in the history of the automobile industry. For years, Tesla spent almost nothing on traditional advertising, and yet the brand awareness and desire were extraordinary. The third insight is about the relationship between failure and progress in wealth building. Look at the timeline of Tesla's development, and you'll find failures everywhere. The Roadster transmission that never quite worked right, the multiple times the company came within days of running out of money, the manufacturing problems with the Model 3 that caused a production nightmare that Musk himself called production hell. There were failed products, missed deadlines, overpromised features that took years to deliver. And yet, each one of these failures was also, in a strange way, progress. Each near-death experience forced Tesla to solve problems that no other car company had ever had to solve before. Each near-death experience stripped away what wasn't working and clarified what was essential. There's a concept in engineering and in innovation called iterate through failure. The idea is that the fastest path to getting something right is often to build it. Find what's wrong, fix it, rebuild, find what's wrong again, fix that, and keep going. This is almost how all great technology is developed. But here's the psychological challenge. Most people and most organizations are too afraid of failure to actually do this. They try to plan everything perfectly in advance. They try to anticipate every problem before it happens. And in doing so, they either never start or they move so slowly that someone else gets there first. Tesla's competitive advantage wasn't just technology. It was a culture that was genuinely comfortable with failure as a learning tool. And that culture came directly from the top, from a CEO who had publicly bet everything he had on the company multiple times. Now let me bring this closer to home, because I know what you might be thinking. This is all very interesting, but I'm not Elon Musk. I don't have hundreds of millions of dollars. How does any of this apply to me? And that is exactly the right question to ask. So let me answer it as directly and honestly as I can. The first lesson is about the difference between calculated risk and reckless gambling. When Elon Musk put his last reserves into Tesla on Christmas Eve 2008, it looked from the outside like a desperate gamble. But from the inside, it was actually a calculated decision based on everything he knew about the technology, the market, and the progress Tesla had made. The difference between calculated risk and reckless gambling is information and conviction. Reckless gambling is putting money into something you don't understand because you hope it goes up. Calculated risk is putting money into something you've studied deeply, where you have good reasons to believe in the outcome, and where you've thought carefully about the downside and decided it's worth taking. Most people never build wealth because they're either taking reckless gambles, following tips, chasing trends, making emotional decisions, or they're so afraid of loss that they never take any meaningful risk at all. The sweet spot, the place where real wealth is built over time, is calculated risk. Understanding something well enough to be willing to put serious resources into it. The second lesson is about the time horizon of your thinking. Tesla lost money for years, and Musk was fine with that, not because he didn't understand accounting, but because he was playing a different game with a different time horizon. Most people evaluate their financial decisions over months, maybe a year or two. If something isn't working in that time frame, they move on. Great wealth creators think in decades. Jeff Bezos famously told shareholders in Amazon in the early years that he expected the company to have years of unprofitability. He said, if you're not thinking in terms of at least 7 to 10-year cycles, you're not thinking about this business correctly. The same principle applies to personal wealth building. The people who build the most wealth over a lifetime are almost never the ones who are chasing the best short-term returns. They're the ones who identify things with genuine long-term value, invest in them, and have the patience and conviction to hold on through the inevitable periods of doubt and difficulty. The third lesson is about the power of believing in something bigger than the transaction. One of the things that makes Tesla's story so powerful is that at its core, it was always about more than selling cars. It was about accelerating the world's transition to sustainable energy. That mission gave the company and its employees and customers a sense of purpose that went beyond purely commercial interest. And here's the financial implication of that. Companies with genuine mission attract talent, customers, and investors in ways that purely commercial enterprises simply cannot match. The best engineers in the world chose to work at Tesla, often for less money than they could make elsewhere, because they believed in what Tesla was trying to do. That mission-driven magnetism created a massive, enduring competitive advantage because you can copy a product, you can copy a technology, you can even copy a strategy, but you cannot copy genuine mission and culture. Those take years to build, and they're essentially impossible to replicate quickly. For all of us watching and thinking about our own lives, there's a version of this principle that applies personally. The things we invest ourselves in most deeply, with the most genuine commitment, tend to produce the most meaningful returns. Not always financial returns immediately, but value in the broadest sense. Okay, let's get very concrete. You've heard this incredible story about Tesla. You've thought about risk, about time horizons, about mission and vision. Now what? What should you actually do differently with your money, your career, or your investments? I want to give you 5 specific things to think about. First, audit your relationship with loss aversion. Take an honest look at your financial decisions over the past few years. How many good opportunities have you passed on because the fear of losing felt bigger than the excitement of winning?
How many times have you held cash sitting in a savings account earning almost nothing because the thought of it potentially going down in value felt too uncomfortable? I'm not saying you should be reckless. I'm saying you should be honest with yourself about whether fear is keeping you from decisions that, on a rational analysis, make sense. The Tesla story is an extreme example, but the psychological pattern, fear of loss causing people to avoid good calculated risks, plays out in ordinary financial life every single day. Second, start thinking in longer time horizons. If you're investing in stocks, in real estate, in your own skills and education, start thinking 5 to 10 years out. Not 5 months, not next year, 5 to 10 years. The market will go up and down in the short term. Individual stocks will have bad quarters. Real estate markets will cool. But over 5 to 10-year periods, the track record of quality assets is remarkably consistent. Tesla shareholders who bought in 2012 and held through all the noise, the doubters, the short sellers, the manufacturing crises, the missed deadlines, made extraordinary returns, not because they were smarter than everyone else, but because they had conviction and a long time horizon. Third, understand the difference between a story investment and a numbers investment. Some of the best investment opportunities are in companies or assets where the current numbers don't reflect the future potential. Tesla was wildly overvalued by traditional metrics for years, and then the underlying business grew into and exceeded that valuation. This doesn't mean you should buy things with no fundamentals just because someone has a compelling story. But it does mean that learning to evaluate future potential, not just current performance, is a genuinely valuable investing skill. Fourth, pay attention to conviction and mission, not just products.
When you're evaluating a company, whether you're thinking about working there, investing in it, or buying from it, ask yourself, does this organization have a genuine mission that people believe in, or is it purely transactional? Organizations with genuine mission tend to attract better talent, retain customers more effectively, and build more durable competitive advantages. These are qualities that tend to produce long-term value. Fifth, and this one is perhaps the most personally important, be willing to be wrong publicly in service of something you believe in. Musk published his master plan in 2006. He laid out exactly what Tesla was going to do and invited the world to judge him by it. That public commitment was uncomfortable. It meant that every missed deadline, every failure, every stumble was visible to everyone. But it also created accountability, attracted believers, and built a community around a shared vision. In your own life, whether it's a business idea, a career change, a financial goal, or anything else, there is enormous value in making your commitments public. Not to perform for others, but because the act of stating clearly what you're working toward and why makes you more likely to follow through. It builds the internal conviction that sustains you through the inevitable difficult moments. Let me close with something I want you to really think about. When Elon Musk was sitting alone on Christmas Eve 2008, deciding whether to put his last reserves into Tesla, there was no guarantee, no certainty, no way to know that 7 years later, the Model S would get the highest Consumer Reports score in automotive history. No way to know that Tesla would one day be worth $1 trillion. No way to know any of it. All he had was his analysis, his conviction, and his belief that the mission was important enough to justify the risk. And here's the thing that strikes me most when I think about that moment. The outcome, the $1 trillion valuation, the cars that sit in driveways all over the world, the company that forced every major automaker to accelerate their electric vehicle plans, none of that was certain. It was possible. It was arguably likely given the quality of the technology and the scale of the opportunity, but it wasn't certain. The real lesson isn't about Elon Musk specifically. It isn't even really about Tesla. It's about this. The most meaningful and lasting value, whether we're talking about companies or wealth or careers or anything else you care about, is almost never created through caution and risk avoidance. It's created by people who are willing to look at something that most people say is impossible and say, I understand the risk, I've done my homework, I believe this is worth it, and I'm going to act on that belief. Now, most of us are not building car companies. Most of us are not going to put our entire personal fortune into a startup. That's fine. That's not the point. The point is that whatever version of this principle applies to your life, whatever calculated risk you've been putting off because the fear of losing feels bigger than the possibility of winning, that is where your most important financial and personal decision likely lives. Because here's what we know with complete certainty about people who build extraordinary wealth over their lives. They are almost never the ones who avoided every risk. They are almost never the ones who played it completely safe. They are the ones who found something they genuinely believed in, understood the risk clearly, and had the courage to act anyway. Tesla exists today because one person on one Christmas Eve made a decision that almost no reasonable person would have made. And the world is genuinely, meaningfully different because of it. That's the real story of how Tesla was built. Not just with engineering, not just with capital, but with the willingness to believe that something important was possible and to bet on that belief when the whole world was saying no. So let me ask you the question I want to leave you with. What is the thing that you genuinely believe in, the idea, the investment, the goal, the project, that you've been holding back on because the fear of being wrong feels too heavy? Because if Tesla's story teaches us anything, it's this. The cost of not trying when you genuinely believe in something is almost always higher than the cost of trying and failing. Think about that, and I'll see you in the next one.